everyone, it is Darkseeker here again. Welcome back for another video. So we are back with part 5 of Get to Know Darkseeker. You can find the other 4 parts of this series in a playlist on my YouTube channel. In the series you get to hear me talk more about me in parts 1 to 4. I covered a range of topics: sports, TV, Hearthstone and other games, politics, religion, food, music, books, my accent, and a whole range of other things. Now the Hearthstone deck that I'm playing today in this video is RenoJackson's Shudderwock Shaman, and my win rate across the July season has been very positive. 24 wins and 7 losses, that is a 77% win rate across a small sample size of games. And it's a deck that I have featured before on this channel, and it does seem to work pretty well. Now in this video we're only going to be looking at one game, or rather the ending of one game, and it was amazing how long that game went on with repetitive Shudderwock turns. So credit to my opponent for sitting through those turns. That will serve as the backdrop to Getting to Know Darkseeker Part 5. For those of you that want to know more about me, keep watching and keep listening. So let's start with our first topic of the video. Thanks to Philipp for suggesting this: my favourite decks of all time. So, I had to think hard about this. I've played so many decks over the years, but my first favourite deck would probably be Undertaker Hunter. And you'd need to go back to the Naxxramas days. So that was the summer of 2014. Undertaker Hunter became a thing, and it was looked at as one of the most dominant decks in Hearthstone. Back then, the Undertaker would gain +1/+1 stats for each Death Rattle minion that was played. So you can see how having 1 or 2 Undertakers on the board early on could allow you to simply snowball your opponent. Now, this was back in the early days of the game, when there were fewer board clears available, less AoE, and the developers did change the card a few months later, so it would gain +1 attack, but no health gain. Now, back then that was a big deal, because gaining the health was so significant. It allowed the Undertaker to survive for a bit longer, and to do a better job of getting value trades. So the card has since been unnerfed. However, other decks and classes have risen up with their power levels, so in the current Hearthstone landscape, the Undertaker doesn't have the same power that it once did back in 2014. However, for a couple of months back then, it was really fun to play. And the Naxxramas expansion as a whole was interesting. And some of those cards, they still see play today because they are considered to be so effective and powerful. Mad Scientist, Void Caller, I think are 2 examples of cards that still are a staple part of many decks. So over the years, I've had a variety of other decks that I've really enjoyed playing. So my second most favourite deck ever would have to be Midrange Hunter, with Death Rattle minions, secrets and some beasts back in 2016. And that was a lot of fun too. It was tempo orientated. In fact, if you go to my YouTube channel and look at the front page of the channel, that deck is featured on the first video that you would see, and that's from July 2016, where I was able to get Legend, beating priests and warriors, which were considered to be pretty powerful at the time. I faced the same warrior opponent twice in a row to get Legend, and this deck ran Call of the Wild, N'Zoth and Dr. Boom as its top end cards. For those of you that are new to the game, there was once a time period when Dr. Boom was run in so many decks. Now this is the original Dr. Boom, which was costing 7, and putting 2 Boom bots onto the board. They would say that if you had 7 mana and Dr. Boom was in your hand, you just played him, and the impact would be quite significant. At the time, Dr. Boom was considered to be an incredibly powerful card that could really swing games into your favour. But now, well, I guess compared to a lot of the stuff that they've been releasing over the last few years, Dr. Boom is no longer that big swing card that he once was. But if you want a taste of what the game was like in 2016, I would recommend that you check out that video on the front page of my channel just to see what it was like to get Legend with Midrange Hunter 5 years ago. Now my third favourite deck of all time has to be what I play now, and that would be Shudderwock Shaman. You are aware of my obsession with the Shudderwock. I just love the idea of battle cries, and it is now probably my favourite mechanic in the entire game after Death Rattles. There's just something really satisfying about battle cries. And to have a card that can then replicate those battle cries, I think is really, really awesome. I do think that the Shudderwock is a pretty fair card, in that you still have to work really hard to make it happen. Unlike some other combo decks that can go off before turn 10, you need a lot more time to make the Shudderwock work. Therefore, I do see it as being fair, in that you are giving your opponent lots of time to win the game before you can play the Shudderwock. And when you do play the Shudderwock, there is no guarantee that your battle cries will operate in the correct order. For example, if your Zola, Grumble and Barista battle cries all happened before the Shudderwock replicates itself on the board, you're probably screwed. So there is a level of unpredictability with it, and that is part of the fun as well. Okay, let's move on to our second topic of the video. What class would I wish was more interesting, so I would play it more? And thank you to Halilo for this topic. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. A really good friend of mine on Twitter, super cool and positive dude, has a real passion for the game. So my 2 least played classes in the game are Rogue and Demon Hunter. Now I never got along with Rogue in terms of the playstyle, thinking back to the early days of Hearthstone, and I know a lot has changed since then, but I never really got into Rogue over time. Now I do think Rogue is an interesting class. I just need to invest a bit more energy, time and thinking in order to get to know Rogue a little bit better. And I'm sure I could find the motivation to play Rogue in the future. On Wild there are certainly a number of different decks, both fast and slow, that would be pretty cool to play. So on that basis, my answer to this question, which class would I wish was more interesting so I would play it more, would be Demon Hunter. I think personally Demon Hunter is far too aggressive of a class. You know, the huge amounts of burst damage that it can do, I think it's a little much. And it's probably on Wild mode one of my least favourite classes to play against, due to its really hyper aggressive nature. And I just personally don't find the class very interesting. So I think it's a class that could be adapted and changed more. Now I'm aware that the class has been changing over time recently. You can play slower versions of Demon Hunter with big demons and death rattles. Now that is going to be better for me, and I am curious to see where things go, and I think the next Hearthstone expansion could provide some interesting new additions for the class, and I am curious to see what direction it goes in. Okay, topic number 3 for the video is the state of Hearthstone. What are my thoughts on that? This is a game that has been around now for over 7 years. And soon enough, it'll be a decade. That's a very long time for a computer game to still be relevant and to still be viable. So I think it's an impressive feat, considering that it's harder and harder to please people as time goes on. There was once a period when the game had a larger player base, I think, and it's only natural that the game will decline over time when it comes to the number of active players. So if you are left with players who have probably been playing the game for a number of years and have quite big collections, it does become harder to attract new players, I think due to the cost of starting up in this game. As new deck mechanics appear and as new cards get printed, you're obviously going to create situations that annoy existing players. And I'm very, very sympathetic to the developers of the game, since they constantly have to come up with new ideas, new mechanics to keep things fresh. And as time goes on, that is going to be harder to do. With a game like World of Warcraft, for example, which I did play for a number of years, even if the mechanics of playing the game don't change very much, you can still keep things very fresh through storylines and additions to the lore that can keep people hooked. Whereas with Hearthstone, I think it's a little bit more difficult to use that same tactic. Because I think with Hearthstone, yes, you can have running storylines between expansions, for example. You can add to the lore of the game, but I think a lot of the established Hearthstone players are going to look specifically at the cards themselves and the mechanics, and then decide whether it's going to be a fun experience to play. So there's a real emphasis on the cards specifically. Over time, you've seen with WoW mode, criticism levied at a small number of tier 1 decks that can dominate the game. You've seen players express frustration with certain mechanics or effects that may be broken, and I'm okay with that. I'm primarily a WoW mode player, as you know, and in general, I am happy with the state of the game. Why, you ask? Well, ultimately I'm still having fun. And I am having just as much fun as I had in 2014 when I first started playing Hearthstone. And that may sound quite controversial to say, but I have a very large collection of cards and I'm able to make pretty much any deck that I want. Now, I'm grateful for this large collection because I know a lot of players are limited to what they can play based on the size of their collection and how much gold and how much dust that they have available to them. I have a lot of gold, I have a lot of dust, and therefore I can craft anything that I want. So I'm very fortunate in that regard. And perhaps in some ways I don't experience the game from the same perspective of most players who have limits on what they can craft and limits on what decks that they can play. Therefore, I can always find a deck that I will enjoy playing no matter the situation in the meta, and that makes the game enjoyable for me and a good use of my time. And I think that mindset helps me a lot because right now, I really don't care if I win or lose. When I first started playing the game, back in 2014, winning meant a lot to me. However, after I hit Legend for the first time, I stopped caring about winning. It became all about having fun, i.e. playing a deck type or deck style that I enjoy with specific cards that I like playing, and having fun whether I win, lose or draw. And I started this YouTube channel and would publish videos on meta decks. And this evolved into publishing videos for off-meta decks, which I've now been doing for the last couple of years. And now my primary enjoyment with the game is focused on those off-meta decks and having fun with them. And if I'm able to win with those decks, hey, that's a bonus. Showcasing those decks and highlighting the efforts of the deck authors is a big deal for me. So as long as I can still do that, I will always be happy, I think, with the state of the game, no matter what. and I think that makes me pretty easy to please. Are there decks that frustrate me from time to time? Absolutely. Mizaki Mage, Secrets Mage, Big Priest, Reno Priest. I do have frustrations when trying to play off-meta decks against those decks, but then I reflect and I realise, hang on a minute, I'm playing an off-meta deck. So of course I'm going to struggle against whatever deck is considered tier 1 at that point in time, and when I accept that, it does make things a fair bit easier. I also will not blame other players for playing what we like to call broken decks, or broken cards, or broken mechanics, or broken effects. Ultimately, Blizzard have designed cards to behave in a certain way, have allowed certain combinations and mechanics to occur. Therefore, that's on Blizzard, and if they want the game to exist in that manner, well, they've made that decision and they're sticking by it. I won't blame the players for that. You know, sometimes you will see a lot of anger attributed towards certain people who play certain decks. I think that anger is misplaced. I think that anger should be channeled in some other way that's a little bit more positive. One of the arguments that I see levied against the game is that it is pay to win. Now, I could see some truth in that, but I also sympathise with the fact that Blizzard want to make money. They are, after all, a business with shareholders to answer to. That is the reality of the situation. Now, you could argue, how greedy does a company need to be when it comes to making money? How much is too much? I guess from my perspective, having acquired more or less a full collection, maybe my perspective on this is going to be different compared to a player that's new to the game, realises how expensive it is and how difficult it is to build up a big collection, particularly if they want to play wild mode. And I recall back in the day, there was certainly a time frame when you didn't have to be pay to win, you could be free to play. You'd spend a few months building up some basic cards in your collection and you could still hit legend, particularly if you played an aggressive, cheap token deck. For instance, Token Druid comes to mind. And actually, I think that's still possible today. I think you could still play hyper-aggressive token decks that don't cost a lot of dust to craft, and you could still work your way to legend. I guess it's a problem though when you want to build a variety of decks and have a variety of legendaries in your collection. That's where I think it becomes really quite expensive, and that's where maybe people decide that the game isn't worth pursuing any longer because it's going to be too much effort to grow their collections beyond one deck or two decks. I think players look at the time and energy needed to gather the dust and the gold needed to continue growing their collections and probably think it's not worthwhile. So maybe Blizzard could make things easier in that regard. I don't know. Now, my ultimate mindset with this game is that it's just a game. I try not to let it stress me out, not to let it annoy me. And the moment it really starts to stress me out, then it's probably time to find a new game. After all, the whole purpose of playing games is to have fun, it's to unwind. And there are plenty of other things in life that cause stress, and I think gaming shouldn't be one of them. What I do like about the game, though, is that if I'm not making progress on one particular mode of play, I can switch to another mode. I can move easily between standard, wild, battlegrounds, and duels, if I really have to. And that's one of the great things about Hearthstone. There is so much content, so much variety in general. Now, having listened to all of this, you may still be wondering why I am still playing this game after 7 years, and why I'm so active on Twitter, and publishing sometimes multiple videos per week on YouTube. Well, it's the same reason that I played World of Warcraft for so long, for over a decade. And it was because of the community of people that I've engaged with. And that same argument applies for Hearthstone. The community of people that I am engaging with on a daily basis here on YouTube and also on Twitter is wonderful. That is now one of my biggest sources of happiness and enjoyment when it comes to this game, interacting with other wonderful people. So that certainly has a big influence on the state of Hearthstone for me. So, in summary, as long as I can keep playing a variety of decks that I enjoy, and as long as I can keep interacting with amazing people like all of you who are listening to this right now, then everything is good for me. Okay, let's move on to our fourth topic of the video. In some of my earlier videos, you would have heard me make reference to a Discord server, and it is called For Doomhammer, and it's a specialist Shaman server. I never thought I would find a Discord server dedicated to the Shaman class, and I'm ever so lucky that I've found that server given my obsession with the Shudderwock card. There's a bunch of really amazing people that exist in that Discord server, and if you ever need advice on the Shaman class, you really should go and talk to them. They are also a bunch of wonderful human beings, and talking to them, interacting with them over the last 6 months has been absolutely tremendous. I would like to give a shout out to Boltzmann and Copa specifically, who administrate that Discord server. Also to Agrius, or Dusty Scales, as you may have heard me refer to him as in my YouTube videos, for spending lots of time talking to me about Shudderwock decks and how to play them. And also a shout out to xAqjeA+PuAwA for just being an amazing human being. Whilst I don't engage with the game on the same level of detail that they do, I do find their commitment and their attention to detail to be amazing. They are forever testing and refining the Shaman decks, and that's wonderful to see, because Shaman as a class has sometimes lagged behind other classes in recent times, in WoW mode specifically, yet the people on this Discord server, they never give up. They're always finding ways to improve the decks that they play. They're always finding ways to try and move Shaman forward. And one thing that I've noticed over the last few months is that Shudderwock Shaman is seeing a lot of play, a lot more play than it ever has done in recent years. And I'd like to think that that's because of Flurgle and Toxin combo being so good that more players have decided to pick up Shudderwock Shaman because they think it's more viable, but also because of the people in that Discord server and elsewhere on Twitter and on social media who have done a tremendous job of really pushing the Shudderwock agenda, of really highlighting the Shaman class and talking in depth about what makes it good and what makes it strong, and players listening to that and thinking, oh, I'd quite like to play that. And then we see Shaman, Shudderwock Shaman specifically, see more play. I'd like to think that this push by the community to move Shaman forward, I think that's helped a lot. And, you know, the denizens of this Discord server, they publish their findings, they publish their decks, so the rest of the community can learn and benefit from them. I've talked about Boltzmann in the past and how I would play his Shudderwock decks before I went to sleep, and how playing them for half an hour, 40 minutes, 1 hour before bedtime would put me in such a positive frame of mind before going to sleep, and it would actually de-stress me before I'd head into a new day. So that is the kind of positive power that these communities can have. They can really reach out and touch other people's lives in a positive way. Not just through deck creation, but through friendship and just being a group of awesome people that have something in common. Right, the final topic of the video is escapism. Now this is linked to Hearthstone. One of the things that's been pretty clear to me, having engaged with the Hearthstone community over the last 6 to 7 years, is that people use this game for escapism. We are still living through a pandemic, and that has made life challenging for everyone. It's perhaps made previous problems or issues that you were experiencing that much more difficult to face. And on that basis, everyone needs escapism. So ask yourself a question. How do you escape from the harshness of the world? Beyond playing computer games, what else do you do? Now for me, it used to be reading and TV. At this moment, I'm not doing much of either. There isn't much on TV currently that is motivating me, beyond TV shows that I'm waiting to be released in the next year or two. I could go back to Japanese anime, and that's something that I've not engaged with properly for a few years now, but I fear that if I start investing time in that again, that it will sink all of my free time. Now, one thing that I've picked up on through my last year at work, and this links back to my discussion about spirituality in the previous Get to Know Darkseeker video, is that doing meditation or mindfulness has been hugely beneficial to me. I'm very fortunate to have a colleague at work that has been guiding me through and coaching me in regards to mindfulness. I've realised that practicing mindfulness can have a profoundly positive effect on my mindset in terms of calming me down. It's also amazing to see the physical evidence of it in action, with my blood pressure lowering. So if you are feeling stressed, it is something that I would recommend that you pursue. At a basic level, mindfulness is all about breathing, focusing everything on your breathing. Of course, it is much easier said than done. But for me, over the last year, it's been a very much worthwhile endeavour. And I know that some of you have spoken to me about it on Twitter over the last few months. I know it's not for everybody, but I'm thrilled that at least for a couple of people that I've spoken to, it's provided them with some help in terms of escaping from the harshness of the world and providing a calming effect, if only for a short period of time. I guess ultimately what I'm trying to say with escapism is have a hobby or an interest that does let you escape from the harsh realities of this world. Whether it is Hearthstone, whether it is TV, whether it is reading, whether it is mindfulness, whatever it is, make sure that you've got something that you can go to help you escape if you need to. So now we come to the end of the video. I'd like to thank everybody for watching. I appreciate that I didn't talk much about the deck that you saw in action. Well, I guess there wasn't much to say. It was the Shudderwock doing Shudderwock things. And I think there may have been some misplays with my Shudderwock plays. I started out with 1-cost Shudderwocks, but somehow ended up playing 9-cost Shudderwocks towards the end of the game. Was there a way to ensure that I would have had access to more 1-cost Shudderwocks rather than 9-cost Shudderwocks at the end? Probably. But in the end it didn't matter, we still won, and kudos to our opponent for sitting through all of that, and for giving me the footage that I could use as the backdrop for this video. Right, so thank you for joining me everyone, and I will see you all again very soon once the new Hearthstone expansion drops, and hopefully we will have more fun with the Shudderwock class. So until next time, please stay safe, please look after yourselves, and as always, please be good to one another.